It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down District 1 and 2 athletics week in, week out in the great state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney, and we are joined by our North Idaho resident and expert, Ryan Scaggs. What's up, Scaggs?
Just recovering from a long night of trick-or-treat candy handing outing, so...
Handing outing. I don't think that's a word, but
that's what it is now. That tells you how long of an evening it was.
Yes.
We had trick-or-treaters coming until like 8:30, so...
Yeah, we are recording this on November 1st, the day after Halloween, of course, and your neighborhood was busy, I assume,
As always.
Knowing where you live. And then where I live is kind of a newer development, and so we didn't get as much foot traffic, but we still got enough that we bought 2 bags of candy and we got through 1. So I looked at my wife and I said, well, I guess we're just gonna have to eat that second bag. And she goes, no, we're putting it in the freezer and saving it for next year.
At least it's not like mine where we just stick like leftover candy on top of the fridge and it sits there for a year. But
yeah,
out of sight, out of mind. But yeah, we bought 3 bags and we went through 2 of them last night. So
yeah,
it wasn't as busy. Like typically years past, like when Halloween lands on like a Friday or Saturday, we'll get over 300 kids. It's bananas. I mean, I set up a fire pit in the front yard every year, and I just sit out there in lawn chairs and hang out.
Oh, that's cool.
Because we have a split level house, so it's like I don't have to go up and down the stairs. So it's more to cure my laziness than it is to actually show that I have Halloween spirit.
Right. Yeah, I had the World Series on last night, and I was kind of handing out candy in between watching that. Best costume that you saw last night?
Oh man, there was one funny one. It was like because of the confidence I can appreciate in the kid. He like showed up and my wife was like, "Oh, are you Moses?" And he's like, "No, I'm God." I was like, "Well
wow.
Then, okay." That was more on the funny factor, but I think the most well done. We had a kid dress up as Maverick. That was pretty cool. Like, I mean, he went all out with the aviators and the air, the jumpsuit and all that stuff. And like from Top Gun, that was pretty cool. He was probably like 4 or 5 years old. For me, that was probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one. The best one I saw was probably it was a middle school aged girl, and she came and she had like a beard kind of drawn onto her face, and I was like, what are you supposed to be? And she said, I'm Kanye West.
We did have like this 6-year-old dressed as Ted Lasso. That one was pretty good too. So
that's funny. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, happy Halloween to everybody, and hopefully you're coming down from that sugar high.
Did you dress up at all?
No, I don't.
No, I had a work function yesterday, so I dressed up. But that was good old Gene Frankel from Blue Oyster Cult, begging for my cowbell, baby.
That's right. Complete with unbuttoned shirt and chest hair sticking out, I'm sure.
I didn't have the gut hanging out the bottom like Will Ferrell did in the skit, but I had everything else going on, like the undersized Henley and everything else. Yeah, it was pretty legit.
Oh man, that's funny. All right. Well, so Halloween's in the rearview mirror. So are a bevy of state championships for the fall sports season, Ryan. We had state cross country and state volleyball last weekend in 2 totally different places. Let's start with cross country. It took place at the Portneuf Wellness Complex in Pocatello, and we're gonna raise our hands here and go, our bad. I don't think we've spent a single second talking about the Coeur d'Alene boys cross country team this year, right?
We did when they ran over in Montana and they won the.
Oh, that's true.
Over there. Man,
okay, look at look at me beating ourselves.
We've given them some love. I mean, we've talked about them a couple times, but not probably to the tune that they deserve with winning the state championship. But the Viking runners have been awesome this year.
So they came into the state cross country meet ranked 10th, top 10 in the country, according to DieStat. They do the national rankings. They're undefeated. They haven't lost an event this year that they've gone to and competed at, and they're continuing their undefeated season. They go and win the 5A state championship over what was a powerhouse Rocky Mountain program. Max Servey Skinner took 6th. Jacob King took 8th. Mitchell Reetzy took 10th, Lachlan May took 11th, and Zachary Servey Skinner took 16th. So your top 6 all finish in the top 16, which is, yeah, that'll get it done.
Yeah, that'll do it. And the fact that they run on a pack so well, like you look at the timing and how they finish, is that relying on one another for pacing and everything else on a long course. That says a lot about that group to be able to not only finish in the top 16, but also finish in the top 16 within a few placings of each other. Being able to run at that clip, continuously as a group is really impressive too. Like that'll win you a few state titles if you're able to do that.
Yeah. So what's next? We think of, oh, okay, you won state, the season's over. Not so fast. We have the Northwest Regionals coming up. This is a meet where the truly elite teams go and compete. We've seen some of the Boise schools do it over the years. Coeur d'Alene's going there to compete. And there is a great chance that they win regionals. It's going to come down to them and kind of a power from Oregon is kind of what it looks like. But then there's a great chance that Coeur d'Alene could qualify from the Rocky Mountain Regional to the national competition, which would be just incredible. I can't wait if that happens.
Yeah, no, that's a great job with that program. They've done a phenomenal job. We look at them obviously during track season, you get to see like how well the distance runners do and the consistency there. But I think that goes unsung to where when you see them, off the rubberized surface and you see them actually running the cross country course, how impressive that group really is and the effort that it's been this year. Hats off to the Vikings for they're not done yet. That's the other part too, is that, they finished a great state season, but they still got some more meat on the bone. So yeah.
That's right. End of November is when that Northwest Rocky Mountain Regional will take place. And then the national competition is in December. Marlo Herford will be writing kind of a recap of regionals and nationals if anybody gets there on IdahoSports.com. So stay on the lookout for that coverage coming later on this month. Let's shift now to state volleyball, Ryan. The North hosted all 6 state tournaments. 4 were held in District 1, and then the 1A, D1, and D2 tournaments were held over in District 2 over in Lewiston. I think the top story from North Idaho is Troy three-peats. The Trojans are your 3-time 1A, D1 champs. You know what? It didn't come easy, though. Grace.
No, they got pushed hard.
So Ryan, we've talked about on some of our other prepcasts, Grace almost didn't make it to state because Grace and Butte County were 2 of the best teams in the state this year. They're both in the same district. Well, it's a 3-team district, so only one team gets to go. They had to win 13 sets over 3 matches on one night at districts. They started playing at 6. They didn't get over till past midnight. They were absolutely gassed. They had to come around and beat Butte County twice in a true double elimination tournament. They got it done. And I started thinking to myself as I'm watching Grace and Troy play, I'm like, they're going to do it again. They're going to go on this miracle run and do it again. Troy holds on and ends up getting the 5-set victory over Grace.
They were down 2-1 at one point to Grace. So, hats off to Grace. That was a phenomenal effort. But I think that, Troy started to wear him down. The battle of attrition took over, and Troy was able to clamp down and win those final 2 sets. But yeah, phenomenal battle.
Yeah, you're right. They were down 2-1. They won the 4th set 25-16, and then that 5th set 16-14. It was razor thin. And I think, if Grace had won that first match and forced the decider, the winner take all, I still would have thought Troy, would have been able to calm down and regroup. But man, I don't know. Momentum in volleyball is a weird thing. So I'm glad Troy was able to close it out and just get it done in the first match.
Yeah.
So,
and that's, we sing Grace's, but with what Troy was able to do this year in a phenomenal season and the teams that they took on too, we talked about it early on in the year, playing up against some of the bigger schools and bigger competition at some of their tournaments and how they were able to battle against the larger schools. That's, an amazing accomplishment to three-peat in any sport is, it's super incredibly difficult. And then you look towards, next year, can they get the 4-peat, and that's, something that what a group of girls on that team that if they can get, that one, for the extra finger and win a state championship every single year in high school, that's amazing. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Yep, that is quite a run. And I'll apologize. I was looking at last year's bracket, which was also a tight 5-set thriller with Grace. It's same story. Grace got up 2-1 last year also. This year they go up 2-1. Troy wins 25-13 and then 15-11 to close it out. I also wanted to give a shout out from the 1A D1 tournament to Wallace. How about the Miners taking 4th place, Scaggs, playing on Saturday morning? What an accomplishment.
No, that's an awesome, we talked about it though, is that, not only can they play, but they can win some matches. And they got things done, and the Miners able to finish with a podium finish per se at 4th place. That's a phenomenal accomplishment with that program, and hats off to that group of girls and what they're able to accomplish. So yeah, and then we'll obviously talk about some of the other classifications too, but I think the North showed up pretty well this weekend with what they were able to do at state volleyball. It was kind of the undertone. I know that state football, with the opening rounds gets a lot of the notoriety, but there was a lot of buzz around volleyball this weekend, and I think it was well deserved.
Yep. So congratulations there. So that was our one state champion from the North. But if we go through the rest of the classifications, Post Falls finishes top 3 at the 5A tournament. They fall just short of getting to the championship match. Congratulations to the Trojans on a great season.
Yeah. No, they pushed Madison in that semifinal match, and then they fell on that one, and then they ended up losing the Eagle in the chance to get the rematch. But 3rd place is a heck of an accomplishment for that program. We looked at it that they were going to be one of the top teams most of the year, and then obviously losing in the district tournament, but coming back and getting some big wins. I think they beat Timberline in the first round. That was a great job by the Lady Trojans, and a great finish to get a top 3 finish is great at 5A volleyball. So
Definitely.
Good job with them.
We also had Lakeland take 4th at the 4A tournament. At the 3A tournament, Bonners Ferry almost got to Saturday morning. They lost in a 4-set match to McCall Donnelly in the loser out game on Friday. At the 2A tournament, Kellogg went 2-out as the number 2 seed, which I was pretty surprised by. And then at the 1A D2 tournament, Deary and Kendrick were both seeded lower. Deary goes 2-out. Kendrick almost makes it to Saturday, but they just miss out, losing to Mackey in a loser out contest. But congrats to all of the teams that got to state and got to compete.
Yeah, no, great seasons by all of the teams, and represented well. I mean, I think Lakeland was one of the teams I talked about. Like, people were selling the Hawks short because the record didn't necessarily look like the best, but you're going toe to toe with Coeur d'Alene and Lake City and Lewiston and Post Falls in your regular season schedule, and then playing some tough tournaments. That Lakeland team was battle tested, and to get a top 4 finish when you have the likes of like Skyview in your bracket, I mean, that's saying something. So Lakeland to get a top 4 finish, that's an awesome job by that Hawks group.
Definitely. All right, let's shift gears now to playoff football, Ryan. The first round took place this past week, and I thought we would start by highlighting the teams that won, and then we could talk a little bit about the teams that weren't so lucky and had their seasons come to an end. Does that sound like an okay way to divvy this up for you?
Sounds perfect, because then we can set the table for next week.
That's right. So I think we should start in Class 4A at a game you were at on Friday night. Sandpoint, the number 6 seed, was welcoming in the number 11 seeded Bonneville Bees, a Bonneville team that was coming in missing a couple of key cogs in the engine, as it were. Sandpoint wins 48-0. Drew Lehman, 7 of 12, 237 yards and a touchdown to Max Frank. Frank had 139 yards receiving, 101 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. Cody Brewster rushed for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the thing is, all these impressive totals were put up on single digit carries, Ryan.
Yeah, no, it was insane. I was sitting there and I was in the booth and Abby was running camera, but I also had like the clock operator, and we were talking at halftime, and I'm like, it seems like Sandpoint didn't get the ball very much. Well, I mean, they had drives, but they were literally 2-3 play drives. Like, you just didn't see their offense on the field very much at all. And that was, I think they only punted 1 time in the entire ball game. So that just says a lot about the efficiency of what Sandpoint was able to do offensively. Lehman was great when he needed to be great. He delivered the ball right on target. I mean, it helps to have guys like Max Frank that you can deliver to. I was super impressed. Cody Brewster ran the ball like a beast. He was on. I had him and Max Frank tied for IdahoSports.com player of the game because they both had 3 touchdowns apiece. But I didn't get the full stat line because I was one-man banding it. And so I tried to keep stats for about a quarter, and it just got too overwhelming. But when I had the stat line, I was like, Max Frank was at 70 yards rushing in the first quarter. I was like, okay, this could be a game. And he had like 1 reception for 87 yards. So, they had drives of like, I think it was 93, 87, and 82 to open the game. And to blank Bonneville in that rushing attack, I want to say overall for the game, Bonneville maybe had 25 yards rushing. I don't know what the final total was, but it was just, an absolute standout performance from that entire Sandpoint team. If they can play like that against Pokey, they've got a chance because they were very well balanced, and they were super effective running the ball. And even Lehman got himself in the game, in the running game too, on a couple quarterback draws. He had to keep that defense honest. And that team, that was a balanced attack that we saw on Friday night.
Yeah, and so let's talk about it. They're in the quarterfinals now. The number 6 seed Sandpoint, they will travel to the 3 seed Pocatello. This is a winnable game for Sandpoint, and the big reason why, Ryan, is because Pocatello played last week inside Holt Arena. And so they had an easy time with Preston. And they're like, okay, we like playing in Holt. We've got a lot of speedy athletes, and we're going to be in Holt again this week, right? No, they got squeezed out of Holt Arena. It was booked up by other teams. So this game will be played outside at Lookout Field, at Pocatello High's outdoor field. Now it's turf, but weather-wise, inclement weather, Sandpoint's used to that. And so I think having the game be outside is a huge bonus for Sandpoint.
Sandpoint plays run-heavy teams really well, and that's something that we've seen the last few years from them. But, like you said, it's a winnable game. If I had to pick, the game, like, it's still a difficult pick because you got guys like, Echo Hawk at running back, and like Pokey brings some athletes into that game, but so does Sandpoint. I mean, Max Frank, nobody had an answer for him, and it wasn't even close. If you want to try to shut the running game down, and you try to shut down that wing T look, they go back out in the spread, and they're going to just absolutely shred you. They throw that bubble screen really well, but they block that thing insanely well too. That's the thing I think that Sandpoint is. I was talking to one of their assistant coaches, and they're like, we're better than we thought we were going to be this year. Because they're looking at next year and the year after, like, we're going to be threats for state championships those years with the groups that they've got coming through. But it's just consistency, more of the same from Sandpoint. It's just they look a little different than they have in years past because we've seen them super, heavy at running back or super heavy at quarterback to where they're just super balanced. I look at this, if Sandpoint can keep that offensive efficiency in place and they get, 3-4 stops, I think they could realistically win this game. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we know Pocatello wants to run the football. Riken Echo Hawk, their electrifying running back, he's been banged up most of the year, Ryan, and they kind of kept him on a pitch count. And they finally kind of let him unleash last week, and he rushed for 204 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I like this Sandpoint defense. I think this is the toughest game for me to call in this quarterfinal round in the 4A playoffs. So Sandpoint went down there and won. It would not surprise me at all. I think officially on the record, I'll say Pocatello, but I mean, Sandpoint Nation, I'd love to be wrong and come back and say, hey, Bulldogs went down and did it. I think the distance traveled might be tough, especially playing on a Friday instead of a Saturday. But outside of that, I think it's even Steven. So good luck to the Bulldogs.
Seeing them play in the semifinals, man, we've grown accustomed to seeing that. And we could see it again for the 4th year in a row. So why not?
We sure have. Let's talk about Lakeland quickly. Lakeland was playing in the opening round. They had to travel to Twin Falls. They actually played pretty tough against a Bruins team that's pretty highly regarded. 28-12 was the final score. Lakeland's season comes to an end. Now, they fell behind 21-0, which was tough. Couple of turnovers, and Twin Falls kind of built up this big lead and then kind of powered down, I think. But for Lakeland, 18-yard touchdown run by Peyton Hillman, sophomore quarterback, 50-yard pick 6 by Roan Riley as well to cap the scoring for Lakeland. And this was a team that just they had to throw the game plan out the window from like the very start of the season when Benson, the projected starting quarterback, goes out with an injury. He never comes back. And so I think this was a good experience for a young Hawks team, and especially like Peyton Hillman. Like he's going to come back and be better, bigger and stronger.
Well, that, and they're not able to get their starting running back, their bell cow back, and Lovey, and like that's just, you look at those guys that the pieces that were missing, it almost becomes like shoulda, coulda, wouldas that, you're able to make the playoffs and you're missing your key cogs and you're still able to make it in. What would we look like if we were at full strength? But obviously that's not the fact. But I think, with the amount of youth, we saw them earlier in the year when they played Post Falls, how young that team is. I mean, they were throwing sophomores out there. They had, dudes that were coming off the JV team and contributing. That there's some promise for that Lakeland team for next year. But to go and compete with an upstart Twin Falls team, that's a hats off for the effort. I mean, they really tried to make it close. It just couldn't overcome that gap from the turnovers at the beginning of the game and close things out. I think if they were able to probably limit those turnovers, we could be talking about a different finish, obviously.
Yeah, it's just a tough way to go. They really were behind the 8 ball from the jump this year, but great job by Coach Mike Schroeder and the Lakeland Hawks. All right, next biggest win in the opening round, Ryan, I thought came at the Class 1A D1 level, where Kamei, picks up a tidy 56-22 victory over Idaho City. You might look and go, boy, they gave up 22 points. It was all at the very end of the game. I mean,
garbage time. Yeah.
They bankrolled a 56-0 lead. And check out some of the stats here. You want to talk about high efficiency usage. Connor Weddle, 6 carries, 144 yards, 3 touchdowns. Colton O'Kane, 10 carries, 117 yards and a touchdown. David Clute, the quarterback, rushes for 75 yards and a touchdown, and he was 4 of 6 passing for 62 yards and a touchdown to Tug Lockred. And this is the guy that is, I think, the best defensive player in 8-man football. And I think he could go hold his own in 11-man football as well. Porter Whipple, 7 tackles, 2 sacks, and a fumble recovery. This is a Kamei team that is locked in, and I think the Cubs get to the semifinals.
I do too. I really do. I look at this team and they're loaded for bear, and not to the pun intended with the Cub thing, but no, you look at what they bring back. I mean, obviously played in the state championship game last year. We knew that they were going to come back, and they were going to come back with a vengeance. And this is a team that realistically could make it back. I mean, I know that they had the hiccup earlier in the year to Logos. They're on the opposite side this year from Logos. I mean, they're on the side with Oakley and Notice. I mean, if we get a Kamei Oakley semi game, that's a matchup that I think is winnable for Kamei. Absolutely. And, it wouldn't be realistic to see an all-North final here. I mean, I know that there's a lot to be done with Logos. So they've got Murtaugh, which is a tough matchup in this round that we'll talk about. But, if you want to look ahead and start doing some bracket spotting and stuff like that, this is a Kamei team that can make noise. And they've been there. They've got experience. They were banged up a little bit early in the year. They are back at full strength, and they flat flexed Friday night.
Yeah, they look really, really good. So there's going to be an 8-man doubleheader inside the Kibbe Dome on Friday on IdahoSports.com. Myself and Garrison Hardy will be on the call for them at 1:00. Kendrick is going to play Dietrich, and we'll get into that game in a little bit. The second game at 4:00 is going to be Logos and Murtaugh, as you mentioned. And there was rumblings that, hey, it's going to be an 8-man triple header inside the Kibbe Dome. And so they approach Kamei and say, hey, you guys want to play in the Dome? And Kamei's like, no, we like playing. We like playing outside. We want to make Grace come up to us and play in the mud and the muck. And
well, that adds an extra hour and a half to any travel too if you play in Kamei versus playing in the Kibbe Dome. So right. I mean, smart move on Kamei if you want to play the mileage game. But yeah. But yeah, no, Kamei is like, let us play in the slop. We'll take it. Like, give it to us.
Yes. So Grace is a team that does a lot of similar things to Kamei. They like to run the ball. They've got a bevy of backs, Wyatt Cutler. But they took their quarterback who had been starting all year and moved him to wide receiver last week. And they started a sophomore at QB. I thought was an interesting move. It worked for them. I don't know what we'll see. Grace is weird. They kind of like playing everything close to the vest. There's no film online of them anywhere. Stats are hard to find. They like being a mystery team, and they don't divulge much information, but I don't think it matters. I think Cami lines up, especially after Cami lost to Grace in the semifinals last year. I think there's a big motivation factor to get revenge, and I do like Cami at home. That game is going to be Friday night, 6:00 in Cami. Let's talk about the other team from the White Pine that's still playing, Ryan. Logos. They are hosting Murtaugh inside the Kippy Dome. This is the 3 seed versus the 6 seed. This is Friday at 4:00 on IdahoSports.com. This Logos offense, we've both seen it this year outside. I can't wait. I can't wait to see Logos get inside on the turf and let it rip.
Yeah, you get 70-degree weather inside on that turf. I mean, you could see video game numbers, like as far as if the offense is clicking and they're rolling. I mean, we talk about Jack Driscoll and his arm. Like, the dude's almost rushed for 1,000 yards this year too. I think he's got 945 yards on the ground. So if that, yeah, fine, load the secondary. He's going to run roughshod on you if you don't put anybody in the box. So this is a Logos team that they've got insane balance. And, you know, that's the part about it, is that you look at it and you're like, man, this is a team that we know they can pass. They run the like hybrid air raid type system for 8-man, but like, you know, they run the ball really, really efficiently too. So, you know, putting this game on turf, and that defense pins their ear back, they go. I mean, they've been really, really good against some really, really good 8-man teams. And what they were able to do against Cami earlier in the year, an offense that scored 56 against Idaho City. I think they kept them, 22 points in the first matchup or something like that.
14.
14, yeah.
And one of them was on a kick. One of them was on a kickoff return. So really, they held them to like 6.
Yeah, I mean, they held Potlatch to under. I think it was under 30 in that game too. Prairie was the same thing. Lapway was this. I mean, you just run down the list. That defense has been just absolute nasty. So I look at this game. This could be a bloodbath. It really could. I mean, I don't want to give Murtaugh or give the opponent a bunch of bulletin board material.
Too late.
This Logos team is legit. I'm telling you right now, for an 8-man, I looked at them last year and I'm like, how is this team not in the playoffs? They were a year away, and they were a year away for a reason. This group is deep. They are good. So I'm high on Logos, especially if they're playing inside. This is a team that I would not want to see on turf at all.
I mean, it's a contrast in styles, right? Logos likes to spread it out and throw the ball and then run it with their quarterback. Murtaugh lines up in a wing tee, basically, and pounds it with Junior Benitez and Eli Merrick, and the quarterback Sawyer Young rushed for I think 5 touchdowns last week. Looking at the stats from last week for Murtaugh, Young, the quarterback, rushed for 221 yards and 5 touchdowns. Junior Benitez and Eli Merrick each rushed for 92 yards. Benitez has gone over 1,000 yards on the season. So, I mean, it's no mystery. Murtaugh's going to line it up and run the football. And if Logos can stop the run and control the time of possession and get Murtaugh behind early, that's going to cause the Red Devils to have to adjust their game plan. So Logos has to get off to a fast start to put Murtaugh behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, if they get him behind the 8 ball, they get a couple scores on them early. I mean, and you try to make a wing team play from behind, that's not how wing T teams are built. And I don't care if you're playing 8-man or 11-man, you're not going to keep up with a gunning offense that can score at will. If the one thing that Logos is going to have to do, protect the ball. They're going to have to protect the football and not have turnovers. But that's where Driscoll's been pretty good with his decision making this year. He's a really efficient passer. So, you look at, kind of tail of the tape, I guess, going into your game, but is if they can keep the football out of the hands of Murtaugh as far as turnovers go, I mean, they're going to score. Like, I think you kind of have to account for that. So can Murtaugh ball control and play defense with their offense?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting for sure. So let's talk about Potlatch quickly as well. Their season came to an end with a first-round road loss at Valley. They fell 30-16. Potlatch got behind big and then tried to rally back in the fourth quarter. Jack Clark throws a 10-yard touchdown pass to Benton Breeze and then a 73-yard touchdown to Ben Johnson. They ran out of time. It's the classic, well, the game was 5 quarters. Potlatch probably could have climbed that hill and gotten it done. I think Potlatch was a team that was really fun to watch this year, and they bring back a lot of whereas Logos loses Jack Driscoll to graduation. They bring back the other skill guys, and Kamiai loses some dudes to graduation. Potlatch brings back quite a bit. And so I think the Loggers are going to be right there in the mix again next season.
I mean, they will, but realistically, you look at it too, is that the conference is changing a little bit next year too with the classification change. So you could say, Potlatch, you're bringing back everybody, and then you get, but guess what? You're picking up Cammy, or you're picking up Kendrick.
So I forgot about that.
So it's like you can say what you want, but that team, 35 miles to the southeast from you is pretty darn good too. So, Latah County is full of some talent right now if you look at who's there. But, we'll talk about Kendrick in a minute. But Potlatch had a great season. I thought that I don't want to say surprised people, but I think that they exceeded expectations a little bit. I thought that they probably could have got a little bit further in the playoffs. Sometimes you just don't, with that youth, you don't get that experience rolling into the first round that you may have with other lineups. But like you said, next year they could be loaded for bear and a chance to make some noise in the playoffs with a lot of that talent coming back for the Loggers. I mean, I know that you're picking up Kendrick in the conference, but you're still going to be able to have some success. I think that, that team you could realistically see playing a couple weeks deep in the playoffs next year.
Definitely. All right. The final classification where we had a winner in the first round, Ryan, was at Class 3A. This was a game you and I were at on Saturday. It was the only Saturday game in the state. It was Timberlake hosting American Falls. Timberlake wins 69-27. Cooper Lenz rushes for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was our IdahoSports.com player of the game. Vaughn Higgins rushes for 101 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had a pick 6 on defense. Caius Tebby rushed for 63 yards and a touchdown. And Cole Meidinger threw for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jacob Yetter caught both of those and had 34 yards receiving. This was a game, though, that was tight for a half and kind of into the third quarter. And then Timberlake finally pulled away, and there's definitely some things that Coach Kelly Amos and his staff can correct this week, and they're going to have to, because now Timberlake goes to Sugar Salem to play the top-seeded Diggers in a Saturday matchup at noon on IdahoSports.com. They're going to play this game at Madison High School in Rexburg. Yeah,
you look at that matchup, and we saw them earlier in the year play each other. Timberlake played them tough. The score didn't indicate the ability that Timberlake had in that game, and the offense that they actually they passed extremely well against Sugar. They just couldn't find the end zone. It was kind of a bend but don't break situation for the Diggers in that game. Timberlake's extremely, they've got some seniors in there. They have the explosive ability. I mean, especially with that running game, they can ball control with that running game, but they got to be explosive in the passing game and take a little bit better opportunities than we saw this weekend, because there was the chances. I mean, there was receivers that were open, and Meidinger just had a little bit too live of an arm and was overshooting his targets, which was something that we hadn't really seen this year, other than this week. And so cleaning it up, they can't turn it over against Sugar. If they're going to have a chance, they cannot have a turnover. We know Sugar is going to get their points. Timberlake's got to be able to convert when they get in the red zone. They were in the red zone. I went back and looked at the stats from that previous game. They were in the red zone 5 times without scores against Sugar. You can't have that. If you're going to expect to be in a game against a really, really good and balanced Sugar Salem team, you're going to have to be able to make hay when you're down sniffing the goal line. You're going to have to put some points on the board. They're going to have to clean up the extra point game. That's the one thing too that we noticed also. So, if Sugar's going to be Sugar, Timberlake's got to be perfect. And I know that's asking a lot of a team to be perfect on any given week, but Timberlake's had a great season playing a tough schedule. I think it's competitive for probably a good half in that ball game. I'd like to see Timberlake, if they can close things out and get some scores, they can make it interesting, but it would take a perfective game from them in order to pull a shocking upset.
Yeah, you're going to have to match Sugar score for score, basically, and try to steal a possession somewhere. So good luck to Timberlake. They'll play on Saturday on IdahoSports.com. All right, now we're going to talk about first-round results at classifications that had teams that fell, and then we can preview some teams had buys and things like that. So let's go up to 5A, Ryan, where Post Falls. This was another game we had Friday night on IdahoSports.com. They hosted Mountain View, and you and I both kind of talked about it last week. We said, I got a bad feeling here for Post Falls. This is just a Mountain View team that has done this time and again. Post Falls came into the playoffs with not a ton of momentum, I thought, and they fall 24-14. They had a couple of critical turnovers, and they end up falling. Devin Burton rushes for 90 yards and a touchdown. Alex Shields scores on a 3-yard reverse. And so for the Trojans, a promising season comes to a close. They finished 6-4. Tough way to fall at home in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you look at it. I mean, I know that Tevin Burns was banged up coming into the game too, and so you knew that you were probably going to see a lot of Burton, which he was a good running back. I mean, you and I saw him in that game against Lakeland. We're like, man, this kid can run too. It was like watching Burns backing up Bustamante last year. So, there's going to be good hands for the future there. But this was a group. There's a lot of seniors in that lineup that they really hung their hat on and relied on. There's still some youth in that lineup too that they can, they're going to be back at quarterback. They're going to be back at, a lot of the key defensive secondary positions. They're going to lose guys like Cooper Craig and Dylan Wolf and stuff like that. But there's some guys that can still play that'll make their way into that lineup next year and be competitive. But I know Cooper Craig, speaking of him, signed a letter or he committed to Montana Tech yesterday. So
awesome.
Congrats to him. And he signing up for a great team. Like you talk about an up and coming team in the NAI ranks at Montana Tech. They are doing great things there. So that's a great landing spot for Coop. So congrats to him. But hats off for a great season. I mean, they were competitive in the IEL, and they just that draw was just tough. Getting Mountain View on the road on a Friday night when you're kind of banged up going into that game, I know that they were banged up coming out of Coeur d'Alene. And I think that's why they didn't look as sharp against Lake City. But it was just not the right draw in that game, but still doesn't short the season that Post Falls had.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder that, you can have a team win a conference championship, bring back almost everybody from that team, but you still got to go out and play the games. And Coeur d'Alene got better from last year to this year. Lake City got better. And so a good reminder that it doesn't always translate to, oh, you're the defending champs and you bring back almost everybody. Yeah, pencil it in. You're the champs again. There are bumps in the road sometimes. And for Post Falls, this will be a good lesson for those younger guys that, hey, we got to go out and earn it. We don't just show up and have it handed to us. So great season for Post Falls. It comes to an end at 6-4. Coeur d'Alene, meanwhile, enjoyed a nice first round by Scaggs. And now we've got a very juicy rematch happening here in the 5A quarterfinals as Rocky Mountain will travel to Coeur d'Alene Friday night, 7:00. You'll be on the call for IdahoSports.com. These two teams played in the regular season. Rocky won 16-0, but that was a Coeur d'Alene team that was different. Jamison Kazar was still playing quarterback. Caden Simmons hadn't taken over yet. So this is a totally different Coeur d'Alene team that Rocky Mountain's going to see.
Well, that was a team that was trying to figure out their identity on offense, like you said, with a different quarterback, different running scheme kind of too when they started the season. They, have come around. The one thing that Coeur d'Alene still has a little bit of a propensity is the turnover. They're going to have to protect the football Friday night if they're going to expect to come out with a win against Rocky, because that's a Rocky team that feasts on defensive opportunity. They're loaded up front in the front seven. We know that Coeur d'Alene could struggle running ball, so it's going to come down. Maybe Caden Simmons at quarterback gunslinging a little bit. He's got targets out there. That's the thing that, Kazar's moved out to tight end, kind of runs in that hybrid H-back slot position out there. He's been extremely effective in the passing game. He gives you a big target. He's like a 6'2", 6'3" kid. So he can stretch the field and get upfield on defenses. They've got other targets out there too, and that, they're effective. I know that you had them in that Rigby game. I think, can they be effective in the running game? They don't have to be dominant. They just have to keep Rocky honest in the running game. And if they can do that offensively, I think that opens up the passing game. And we could see some fireworks. I mean, I realistically look at this game. It could be a 21-17, type of game. Really, I mean, both defenses are great. Where that Coeur d'Alene defense we know is pretty elite too. They've been playing better down the stretch than I thought that they were at the beginning of the year, and that was saying a lot. So, they've been feasting on turnovers. Their turnover ratio statewide, I think they're second or first in turnover margin in 5A. So they get you the ball back. Can they do something with it on offense is going to be the question on Friday night.
Yeah, and Rocky offensively, it's like they're just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. They play 4 different quarterbacks, Ryan. Have you ever heard of that before?
Other than having like a catastrophic injury, no, have not. Yeah,
They
that just
go in
doesn't
every
happen.
week with the game plan of we've got 4 kids that are going to play quarterback and they all do different things for us. And I don't know. Is that tough to game plan for? I guess, but man, I think Coeur d'Alene is going to be able to hold serve here at home. This is a team. So we've gone the opposite directions where when they first met, Rocky had a pretty good idea of what their identity was. They had one kid that played quarterback the entire game.
Yeah,
And now it's like Coeur d'Alene's locked in and said, this is our identity. And Rocky goes, we're not really sure what we want to do. We're going to
yeah.
play
When
this kid and this kid. And
number whoever's in, they're passing. Okay, we know what we need to do and adjust in our secondary. Okay, this kid comes in, they're going to be run heavy. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, you're kind of, I don't want to say tipping your hand there, but defensively, I mean, I just look at Coeur d'Alene. They've matured over the season, and they are absolutely, I mean, Shea Robertson is one of the best defensive players in the state of Idaho. And, you know, you look at the season he's having, that I think he goes off on Friday night too. I really do. Like, he's going to take over. He's a gamer. That's going to be a fun one to have. And Coach Etch and I will have that game on Friday, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a dandy of a ball game.
That's right. You're going to have Brian Etchison on the call with some color commentary, Ryan. That'll be a fun listen on Friday night on IdahoSports.com, 7 o'clock kickoff. All right, 1AD2. Let's swing all the way back down the other direction here. And let's talk about a couple of North Idaho teams that fell in the opening round of the 1AD2 playoffs. Lewis County went down to Tri-Valley for that rematch of that crazy game that happened just a couple weeks ago where Tri-Valley won as time expired. The theme of the show is turnovers. Lewis County had a couple of turnovers that ultimately did them in. They fall by 10, 32-22. Lewis County led this game in the second quarter, 14-6, but a couple of turnovers, and Tri-Valley converted those turnovers into touchdowns. And all of a sudden, Tri-Valley led 26-14 at halftime. Gage Crow scores 3 rushing touchdowns for the Eagles in the loss. And Coach Monty Madrell, summed it up and said, hey, we have to tip our hat to the better team, and we turned the ball over too much today.
Yeah, and that's, we talked about the hype in the rematch coming back, that we could have saw it be a back and forth affair, swing the other way because it was so close the last time. But yeah, like you said, turnovers, man, they come back and they can haunt you, and they haunt you sometimes in the worst way, especially if they're leading to points the other direction. It's essentially like hitting the minus button on your score. So, to have turnovers go the other way and not be able to convert into points for yourself is just, that's a big hole to dig. And that's just, you saw it happen on the scoreboard. You just couldn't overcome your unsurmountable difference. So,
yeah.
But doesn't negate a good season from Lewis County. So, I mean, that's a tough conference.
Every game they were in was entertaining. I'll say that.
Yeah.
They played a lot of close, fun games this year, for sure.
Look at next year. I mean, if you want to look ahead too, to kind of break down for next year, I mean, you got Genesee coming down, you've got Deary, you've got Timberline, you've got yourself. I mean, that's a, realistically, that's a pick 'em for who wins that conference coming out next year. So, losing Kendrick is kind of a big deal, I think, for the 1AD2 opponent. I know that they're probably not going to miss the Tigers much, but things get ultra competitive next year. So
yeah, they're working out a trade where Kendrick is going to move up and Genesee is going to move down. So Genesee will join this White Pine League next year, and we'll see. It should be really interesting. Up in District 1, Clark Fork was hosting Garden Valley in the opening round of the playoffs. Ryan, it was 21-14 at halftime, and I started calling them the Cardiac Cats because they just always seem to, when their backs are against the wall, that's when they come out and produce. They fell behind 21-0. They got it to 21-14 at halftime, including a touchdown pass from Ethan Howard to Chase San Roman with no time on the clock right before halftime. They scored on a long pass. And so we got to halftime, and I'm like, all right, 21-14. Let's settle in. And the final score ended up being 54-36. I was like, how did this happen? Just the amount of points that were scored in the second half. Garden Valley, you have to tip your hat to them. They recovered an onside kick. They had a 4th and goal from the 20 that they converted with a touchdown pass. Really, Clark Fork played as well as they possibly could have. They just gave up a couple of big plays. And then the real backbreaker was Clark Fork had just scored to cut it to, I think, 2 scores. They went for an onside kick, trying to give Garden Valley a taste of their own medicine. Max Yearsley returns it 55 yards for a touchdown. And that was just kind of the night it was for Clark Fork. But man, what a fun team that was to cover this year. We did 3 Clark Fork games this year on IdahoSports.com, and we would love to do more next season. They finished with a final record of 4-4. And second year in a row that they've been in the playoffs. So that was a huge season for them, even though they fell in the first round.
Yeah, and that's a momentum builder. I mean, we talked about it last year, being able to make the playoffs again and host a playoff game for the first time in, I don't know if it was ever or forever, but the fact that they made it there, and there's some momentum building around that program. And into conference next year, I mean, obviously everybody's in the same level. It's going to be, it's a competitive league. It really is. It's turning into one of the better leagues, I think, top to bottom, as far as competition goes. With Mullen, St. Regis being able to do what they've done, and then you look at Clark Fork being there. Lakeside has been up. I mean, I'd love to see Kootenai eventually turn things around and really make that a nice little run in the conference. But you do what you can do in 1A D2 football week to week, and Clark Fork's been able to keep guys in the game, and it hasn't been the same lineup every week, but they've been an exciting team to watch, and they are like a cardiac kids that I don't want to say they, in your game, they sleptwalk kind of through the first half a little bit, I think. And then both teams woke up and like, oh, we're actually playing a football game. We're going to actually start executing. And that's what you saw in the second half of that game. But great job by the Wampus Cats once again. I mean, to make it to the playoffs is a big deal in any conference, and that's something that they earned their way in. They did it the hard way, winning their way into the bracket. So obviously they didn't get to play in the second weekend, but they're building something up there that I think for the future is going to be really bright.
Definitely. So congratulations to Clark Fork on a great season. So who's left in the 1A D2 playoffs? Well, Kendrick and Mullen St. Regis. They were the 2 district champions. They both got first round byes. Kendrick is going to host Dietrich in the Kibbe Dome Friday, 1:00 kickoff on IdahoSports.com. This isn't the team I think people were expecting Kendrick to face because Dietrich went to the District 3 champion Council in the opening round last Thursday, Scaggs, and they smacked the Lumberjacks around 50-28. They forced a flurry of turnovers. They were extremely efficient on offense. And so here we go, a championship rematch from a year ago this year in the quarterfinals, Dietrich and Kendrick. And Dietrich is a sneaky team indoors. This is going to be, I think, a more interesting game than people are billing it up to be.
It's always a test because we look at Kendrick last year. I mean, I don't want to compare year to year, but how dominant they were. And then Dietrich gave him fits, and then Kendrick closed him out late in that one. I think it's going to be the first half could be competitive. I think that the talent level difference, though, is going to be pretty drastic. You look at who Dietrich brought back from last year's, team that played in the state championship to this year. There's still some guys back. But guess what? Kendrick brought back almost everybody. So, and then you look at, some of the younger guys have gotten better too, and they've been getting contributors from, Nathan Twite and, guys like that you're going to be handing the keys off to Nathan next year at quarterback, very likely, and you're not going to miss a beat. He's played a ton at quarterback because they've had to play backups because they get running clock on team at halftime. So, it's like the battle of attrition, I think, is if you can push Kendrick a little bit in the first half, keep it within a possession or two going into the second half, you give yourself a chance because I don't think Kendrick's been there much. I mean, we know about the Oakley game, that there was a test there. Other than that, like Kendrick really hasn't been pushed much this year. So what can you do? I mean, I think you have to go out there and smack him in the mouth right off the bat. I mean, you have to throw a haymaker, get a special team score. You're going to have to probably get a turnover and a score off of it, and ball control. Just make them have fits to where they're going to have to start throwing the kitchen sink at you defensively to get you off the field. And I don't want to give away, Coach Hobart's game plan or anything like that because, one, I don't know it. But I just know if I was going to coach against that team, that's exactly how I do it. I'd come out and try to smack them right off the bat. But Kendrick is so dang deep. They are so disciplined. They've got a coach on the field at quarterback. Ty Kep is as good as it gets. I don't care at any classification. I would take him as my signal caller. If I'm a 5A school or a 1A D2 school, I would take him. He'd be, first off the bench. I'd pick him at QB because all that kid does is win. And you got the class around him of athletes. That's just a special group. I think Kendrick wins. I think they win big going away late. But I think Dietrich can keep it close in the first half. I do.
Yep. It's going to be for Dietrich to win, they're going to have to do the same thing they did last week, which is force a couple of turnovers and convert those into scores. And Kenrick just doesn't turn the ball over that much. So
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. The other game, Ryan, Mullen St. Regis will host Hagerman. Hagerman shut out Mackey 70-0 in the opening round of the playoffs last week. They will make the long trip to Mullen on Saturday for a 1:00 kickoff. This is a game you and I will be on the call for on IdahoSports.com. And basically, Hagerman's going to come in and they want to be smash mouth. They love running the football. They pride themselves on their physicality. Can Mullen St. Regis answer the call is going to be the big key.
And it's you talk about the teams being able to run the ball, but the thing that Hagerman does really well is they score explosively with the running game. They're getting runs of 50, 60 yards on their runs. It's not, they do a lot of methodical drives too, but they get some breakaways. I've asked around a little bit in regard to this game. I've got some thoughts on what could happen. I think Mullen St. Regis keeps it tight just because they've got some good athletes. If we have to pick them, which we do for our pick 6 this week, this was one you have to give me a game I'm calling to pick, and I'm going to be like the unpopular guy walking into the stadium because I did pick against Mullen St. Regis this week. But I think that's a tall task. That's a deep team that's got a really explosive offense with a lot of efficiency. They just don't turn the ball over much, and they control the game very well. Does Hagerman. So that's going to be a tough one for Mullen. I think Mullen can make it tough, especially if they get some turnover, get a couple turnovers, maybe get points off of those or points in the special teams is how you're going to be able to get a recipe for success on Saturday.
Yeah, and so for Mullen St. Regis, they are starting a freshman quarterback, Connor Lewis. He is the nephew of Jesse Allen, the St. Regis coach, right? So this is the co-op between Mullen and St. Regis. A lot of the kids are from St. Regis. That Mullen side of kids is dwindling for sure. Yeah. And this is a off-season topic, but what happens to this co-op? It's going to be very interesting. I've heard a couple of things that would be interesting. So I just want to see this co-op, this season ride as long as they can, but they are going to play a very tough physical Hagerman team. And those D linemen, I'm looking at Josh Houston. I'm looking at Blake Knoll, the big nose tackle. He's going to have to bring his lunch pail and get it done if Mullen St. Regis wants to win this game. So it should be an interesting matchup for sure.
Yep.
And then finally, 2A Scaggs, our only team from North Idaho is Grangeville. They didn't play last week. They had a first-round bye, and they now have the pleasure of traveling to the number 1 seed Declo on Saturday, 1:00 kickoff on IdahoSports.com. That's 1:00 Mountain Time, 12 Pacific on IdahoSports.com. Hey, Grangeville comes in with no pressure, right? Declo is the team that's undefeated. Everybody's expecting to go on a deep run. Grangeville can just show up and play their game and see what happens.
Yeah, they're going to be – I think this is the kind of game that you go in and, you could see a first drive trick play. You're going to have to throw some wrenches out there that Declo hasn't prepared for. I think that you're going to have to probably catch them sleepwalking a little bit if you're going to make this game competitive. I think, realistically, just athlete on athlete, Declo's lineup. I know games aren't played on paper, but that lineup Declo's got, they are a tough, deep group. That's a huge ask of Grangeville. Congrats on getting that first round bye for winning the conference championship, but it didn't do you any favors in seeding. You're going to have to meet him eventually. So if I'm Grangeville, you take shots and you take him early. Try to see if you can get maybe a backbreaker, turnover or something like that and try to keep it close. But that's a big ask with a great team in Declo and having to hit the road to take them on.
Yep, we'll see if the Bulldogs can get it done. The Road Warriors, good luck on Saturday, 1:00 on IdahoSports.com. All right, well, that was another heavy loaded edition of the North Idaho Prepcast. As the field winnows, Scaggs, so will be the length in our episodes until we get into the winter sports season.
Less to talk about, at least for a couple of weeks. But yeah, so hopefully good luck to all the teams up north and you give us more to talk about next week. But I think that, the North could represent pretty well this weekend. We could see some shocking results. I mean, I'm looking at Sandpoint possibly getting the upset there. So yeah, other than that, until next week, I'm ready to rock and roll for Friday night with Coeur d'Alene and Rocky Mountain.
Yes, and for the second week in a row, we will be covering 17 games statewide. There's 24 total. We're covering 17 of the 24. That's pretty darn good. You can see the full list of games we're broadcasting by clicking on the Game Streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com. All right, thanks for tuning into the North Idaho Prepcast, everybody. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney, and we'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.